So welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to the often bloody battlefield that surrounds Lake EVENDIM. And obviously Lake EVENDIM is kind of like a donut shape in terms of a battlefield, because there is this large lake in the middle, of course, and then there is a landmass that runs all the way around it, although there is this little island in the middle. But never have I actually seen it utilised on this map, because usually whether it's a free-for-all or a 4v4 or 3v3, the deployment zones are such that it's not really worth your time to try and fortify this area, because you'll either be leaving your allies to die, or you'll be sat away in the corner and everyone will come after you if it's a free-for-all, because camping on that is obviously going to draw a lot of attention to yourself. But because of the deployment zones, no one actually deploys on this side of the lake from the very start anyway, because the player that would, in this case Master Blaster, his deployment zone primarily encompasses the lake, and then there are a few little spits of land that he is able to deploy on, so I assume there's going to be a gentleman's agreement in place that allows him to not simply get slaughtered, although he is playing as the Hobbits, so perhaps no mercy is in order. But yeah, well, we may as well go through his army first of all. He's not the player that sent me the replay, but we've already mentioned him. He is of course playing as the Hobbits, and the vicious little bastards that they are in this current patch, they are quite effective. Especially in a free-for-all, because they have disposable manpower, which means you can afford to take a few losses and it not be detrimental to your cause as a whole. But also they have a lot of difficult to deal with units. You know, a lot of their infantry tends to be either AP, anti-cavalry, or both, which is very useful obviously all around. Particularly against all the opponents he's facing today. Even the elven opponent that he's facing off against has got decent armor values. But of course they do there is the downside that they are very low in terms of defensive values. They're not the hardest force either to break if you manage to take away their support, so you know, it is a double-edged sword, but for the most part most people are in agreement, I think, that the Hobbits are an incredibly awkward faction to deal with, just because of all of their bonuses, and also the fact that they can sort of field a lot of numbers and swamp forward. Who would have known that the Hobbits were so vicious? Battling Brandybucks in behind here, as well as the Farmers of Buckland. So again, two units that are both armor piercing. The Farmers of Buckland, though, have got a huge charge bonus and a lot of good attack as well, but obviously not a lot of defense. The Proudfoot Protectors are also in there, which is probably the closest thing the Hobbits have to a durable infantry unit, albeit first and foremost they are crossbows, but they are actually armoured pikemen when they are in melee, which is obviously very good, because one of the things that most people try and do to crossbows, even if it is quite risky, is try to charge them down with cavalry, because while they may take a volley on the approach, which would be devastating of course, when the charge lands, you know, the crossbows will then be mostly neutralised, but that is not the case with the Proudfoot Protectors. The cavalry will take even more losses than it would bargain for, so you need to be very careful when dealing with them. Speaking of which, we also have the Ents over here. The Ents, of course, are one of the real powerhouses, one of the linchpins of the Hobbit faction, because without them, they really would be sort of overly fragile when it comes to their infantry force, but because the Ents are present, they are not. Ents are obviously very difficult to deal with. You know, most people view them as being very similar to trolls. I think they are actually slightly stronger than trolls. They are also very expensive. That's not such a problem for the Hobbits. It can be a bit of a problem for Mirkwood, because obviously Mirkwood have got quite an expensive army anyway, but the Hobbits do not. The Hobbits have got a lot of money that they can play with, because a lot of their units are quite cheap. Speaking of which, Sheriffs of the Farthings, which are a unit of missile cavalry. I mean, you could look at them as javelin cavalry, because they do have hand-thrown projectiles in the form of their pebbles, but obviously they don't do anywhere near as much damage as something like the Coldfell Maidens or the Riddermark Skirmishers, but you can use them in much the same way, and they're not overly expensive either, and they have got a bonus against other cavalry in melee as well, I believe. In here we can also see the Gandalf's Fireworks, which are in a really precarious position. I mean, they could get tons of damage done very, very quickly, especially to the Lothlórien player over there, because there is a bit of terrain which is sort of blocking the path to Sin. But we'll see what Master Blaster decides to do, because if he does open up with his fireworks, he is going to draw a huge amount of attention to himself, and he's got no infantry to protect his fireworks with. It's all cavalry, so that could be a bit of a problem. We'll see. But he's also got the Bjornings, which are the other really powerful unit the Hobbits have at their disposal, the Bear Cavalry. Bjornings riding Bjornings, because obviously they've got a lot of hit points. You could look at them as being kind of like wargs on steroids in the way that they work. But obviously there are only so many of them, so they do have a bit of a shelf life, and also their defense and armor values are relatively low, much like wargs. Speaking of which, let's move on to Sin of the Dark Cloud, who is the player who sent me this replay. He's going to be playing as Númenor today, and it is worth saying that we have the Hobbits, the Númenorians, the Black Númenorians, and the Elves. So place your bets for who's going to win this fight. The regular Númenorians are here. He's got some Balagar archers here on the front with the armor upgrade. A very, very good archer for absorbing pressure, especially with the armor upgrade, because Honestly, their base armor values are not huge, but when you combine the upgraded armor with their bucklers, they can absorb a lot of pressure from afar. They don't do a lot of damage, but that's not really the purpose behind them. They're just here to sit and absorb a lot of pressure, which, considering he's across from Lothlórien, is a good way of thinking, because there's no way that Númenor are going to be able to outshoot the elves in terms of pure quality over a long period of time. Even if their armor-piercing archers are good, they have very limited ammo. Speaking of armor-piercing, we have the Seafarers of Nindamos, which are probably the reason why I think Númenor are quite a good faction overall, because they're huge missile damage, even for javelins. They may only have a little bit of ammunition, but if you can land just their few shots on the enemy, you're going to be able to do tons of damage to them, and that will give you the advantage you need for your powerful infantry to then do the rest. And the Seafarers of Nindamos, to my mind, are the most essential unit in the Númenor roster, just because they are really Númenor's most reliable source of armor piercing, to my mind. But yeah, I mean, they're going to be important here as well, regardless of who they use their javelins on. Remena Abarim, which again are another important unit in Númenor, just because they make that really heavy infantry focus sort of. They typify that, really. They are a very important factor in that, especially considering the fact they do have a very high base attack value for a unit of this type, which should be very useful against all the factions on display, to be honest with you, whether it's the more low defense Hobbits or the much higher defense Lothlórien and Umbar. Behind them, we have another source of armor piercing, albeit one that you can't really mass up too much. The Remena Nardukadar armor piercing spears, of course, very, very nice against the right opponent. Very similar to the kind of spears that the Gondorians have available to them at the higher levels. Royal Legion of Armenelos, honestly, probably my choice for being my favourite Númenorian bodyguard unit on foot. The Pharazim Swordmasters are, of course, stronger than they are in terms of stats, but the Royal Legion having 20 more men in the unit is honestly a huge deal, especially considering that they are around about as powerful as the Wardens of the White Tower. Having 20 more men is massive. So they can sit in the middle of the line and be very, very effective against most opponents, to be honest with you. There are very few that can beat them for outright quality. Naruna Aru Sentinels, to add a little bit of inspiration to the front line. Númenor's morale, for the most part, is okay anyway. Like, they're one of the factions which have got good morale, as you would expect. But it never hurts to just add a little bit on top of that to make it even less likely that you're going to break. Adunaim Shadowbows up here on the side. I have been on the receiving end of the Adunaim Shadowbows in Sin's hands before. I was actually on the winning team in that battle, but I'm not quite sure how my army managed to survive their encounter with that ranger unit right there. But I assume that they're going to bide their time and try and get up onto this really high ground over here and shoot right along someone's lines. We shall see. And then Pharazim Nobles and Remena Cariberim. So we have the Pharazim Nobles, which are of course a fantastic unit of sword cavalry, multiple HP. They aren't quite as powerful against other forms of this unit, against other cavalry melee like the Haven Knights, which are Inquisitors. They will be stronger, but they do have a slightly higher charge as well. So it's kind of a mix of sword knights and spear knights. But for the most part, I would just, for ease of use, because it gets very confusing to think about all these different subtypes, to be honest with you, just think of them as sword knights with a better charge and not quite as strong as the other sword knights in melee, because that's how I think of them. Functionally speaking, that's how they are. And then here we have the Remena Cariberim, which are essentially a unit of spear cavalry. Again, there's sort of stipulations with that, but to be honest with you, it's easier to think of them as spear cavalry because they are very good against other cavalry in melee, as well as having a nice charge as well. So definitely multifaceted in what all these forms of cavalry can do. Now, we shall look at Yo Ranger 0123, who's going to be playing as Lothlórien. He finds himself actually sandwiched in the middle of everyone, so perhaps Lothlórien will find themselves on the losing team today, because you can see that Rezep over there is sort of going to be coming around this side as well, I would imagine, so he finds himself caught out on all sides. But if anyone can make it grisly to try and march through them, it will be Lothlórien, because they have a lot of really deadly missiles and a lot of very nice infantry as well. But I would say the primary pitfall for Lothlórien, honestly, would be picking too many missiles. Lothlórien's missiles are good, but I feel as though it's best used in tandem with their high damage infantry, rather than just trying to go for a full archer composition, as we saw in a very recent battle where Mirkwood tried that. It can be damaging, but it won't win you the battle, to be honest with you. A couple of units of Marchwards of the Wood with their poison arrows, so nice bit of morale debuffing there, although that's only really going to be helpful against the Hobbits, I would assume. I think both Númenor and Umbar, especially with their high armour and ability to absorb that pressure, would be just fine. Over here we've got some Loren-armed archers, which are of course the heavy Lothlórien archers. They don't have any special projectiles, but a huge amount of base damage, and of course they'll pull out those curved elven blades in melee and be very, very effective there. We have some Blades of the Wood, so just a unit of basic light elven infantry, but of course we know how effective this kind of unit can be. Units like the Eldar Makar, of course, are a very good example of a unit like that. Another unit I'm a big fan of are the Loren-armed Axemen. They are the higher tier line infantry unit that Lothlórien have, similar to the Imladris Guardians of Imladris or the Hiriaut of Mirkwood. And of course the Axe means they have slightly lower melee defense but higher melee attack, so again that just plays into Lothlórien's aggressive focus in melee. Some Elder Council here, of course, Spear, Javelin hybrids, very useful against enemy cavalry but also against infantry. They want to be careful about advancing into the jaws of Númenor though. Considering Númenor's position, I certainly wouldn't be marching up that hill into the Seafarers, but we'll see what Yo Ranger wants to do. Karas Galadhorn's Guardians, a very, very strong unit of pikemen to help hold down the front line, but I'm not sure how much of a front line Lothlórien are going to have, and they certainly can't face both directions. Watchers of the Goldenwood with their Silverthorn arrows, which knock down units as they approach. It can make it very difficult to advance towards Lothlórien if you've got a unit like this shooting at you. And of course they're very, very strong in melee as well. They're probably the strongest unit that Lothlórien have at their disposal in melee, just because they have slightly more men than the Kindred of Celeborn. And then we have a very strong Lothlórien cavalry force actually, which is interesting considering of all the factions that are on display, Lothlórien's cavalry would be cost effective against none of them if all of them had brought cavalry. Although I suppose he's banking on the fact that Umbar, with how expensive their cavalry is, maybe haven't brought much cavalry. So he's going to try and overwhelm them. 2 units of Loren-armed Mounted Company, really good units of Lancers this. Similar, you would say, to the Elder Enway Lancers, albeit slightly lower stats, but very, very slightly. We have the Riders of the Goldenwood as well, which are essentially just obviously mounted versions of the Watchers that we saw with their Silverthorn arrows. And also a bit of an ambush going on here with the Galatharan Blade Masters getting ready to pounce. We'll see though. There's also the Karen Amroth Rangers, so he's obviously hoping Umbar do not advance up this hill into the jaws of his army. And then moving on to the final player in this battle, we have the Black Númenorians, played by Rezb, of course, as Umbar, as we've seen previously. Umbar certainly have a lot in common with Númenor. Númenor have got sort of influences from many other factions in Reforged, of course, but none more than Umbar. They share quite a few units with them, and certainly a bit of a style with them as well. Playstyle anyway, of course, they share a visual style. Belagair Archers, once again, a couple of units. Again with the armour upgrade, so it's going to be very much a dead heat between the two of them if these 2 units of archers ever meet, but I doubt they will with Lothlórien between them. And then in behind we have some Corsair Blackguards, which are very similar in many ways to the Seafarers of Nundamor, so I believe the Blackguards... Well, I mean, the Blackguards pull out a scimitar, which means they would have technically higher melee defense and lower melee attack than the Seafarers. But I'm not sure what the ammunition situation is for the Corsair Blackguards, to be honest with you. I would assume it's the same, but I might be wrong. The Corsair Blackguards might have lower damage but more ammo, which would be interesting to know. Few Alcaron, well, actually one Alcarondas Legion back here, obviously a very good unit of line infantry, much like the Romena about him, only I believe they have a lower melee attack but higher defensive skill, so they will keep themselves alive a little bit better in melee, albeit do less damage over a period of time. A Dunaim Shield Guard, very nice heavily armoured spears that Umbar have available to them, albeit quite expensive for spearmen. A couple of units of upgraded Balakith Axe Guard, which have a bit of an inspiration on them, and also with their armour upgrade and combined with their pretty decent defensive skill, make them a very nice unit of higher end shock infantry. Not really a fan of the axe model, as I've said before, but still, we make do. Trebuchet, which has been changed pretty significantly actually in 0.97, considering it is now far more accurate. Still is more damaging than the catapult, however it has less ammunition now, so you have to use it wisely. We'll see how he uses it here. And then finally a unit of Alcarondas Faithful at the back here, which is a really strong unit of melee knights. But they do lack a few numbers. That does put them a little bit behind something like the Haven Knights of Dol Amroth or the Witch-Realm Inquisitors from Angmar, but still very, very strong nonetheless. But without further ado, I think it's about time we got underway. So let's see what Master Blaster is going to do here, because it is going to be his choice. I'm not sure whether he is going to try to retreat his Gandalf's firework, because he's running all of his cavalry away, so I assume there may very well be a gentleman's agreement to allow him to retreat. Although maybe he won't. I mean, he did have the choice to put his Gandalf's fireworks over there, to be honest with you. So, yeah, I mean, if I were Lothlórien, I'd be super tempted to shoot them, but also Lothlórien very wisely is actually going to retreat from this particular engagement and is instead going to face off against Umbar. Rather than charging in here and allowing himself to get caught between 3 armies, he's going to try and single out the one, and then that will of course lead to the Hobbits and Númenor facing off against one another. Although that might not be the best thing for Númenor, because Númenor will need to move forward. They will be forced into moving forward in many ways, because if the Gandalf's fireworks get set up, it's going to be pretty grisly for the Númenorians if they set up on this hill. and that will be how the Hobbits need to get Númenor off this hill. Here come the Remena Caribur, who are going to charge right on through, and I mean, one way of dealing with the Ents is to directly charge them with a unit of cavalry that has a high charge bonus, and of course now Sin is going to try and kill off the Gandalf's fireworks. In come the Bjornings, who are going to get a really nice side-swiping charge. The Remena Caribur are going to get caught on the Bjornings now, and the Pebbles are going to come in as well. I can see why Sin is going after the Gandalf's fireworks, because it is the most important target for him to try and catch, because if he can kill them, the Hobbits will have no choice other than to try and assault Númenor in their position, and Sin is just going to continue to pull on through with his cavalry. And again, this comes down to maybe a bit of an error in Master Blaster's deployment, because, you know, the Gandalf's fireworks are always going to be a very useful thing to try and dislodge an enemy position, but already the Hobbits find themselves at a serious disadvantage. If he can't save this Gandalf's fireworks unit, he's in massive, massive trouble, and I think actually it's about time we went down to half speed, considering things are going to kick off on the other side of the battlefield as well. He is going to be able to save his his artillery, I believe, with the Ents and the Bjornings coming over here, but it is worth saying that cavalry can squirm its way out of trouble, especially strong cavalry like this. So it's not enough to just catch them in melee and then hope that's the end of it. You need to keep chasing them down. And as if that wasn't enough, his Pharazim nobles are absolutely butchering the sheriffs of the Farthings, because unsurprisingly I think the Hobbits are trying to micro their fireworks out of position. And that of course means that the other units of cavalry are going to be caught out. So the pebble throwers, you know, these very basic Hobbits are going to find themselves at the mercy of some of the strongest sword cavalry units in the game. Sheriffs of the Farthings also down here on the lower ground, so definitely the terrain favours Númenor. But if they can get the fireworks into position, that will be all they need to really make Númenor regret banking up so close together on this hill. But that is a big if. The Caribrim are actually routing and broken, so that does go to show how strong the Ents and the Bjornings are. That is the downside to completely ignoring these two units and trying to go after the fireworks. You haven't managed to kill the fireworks, you've lost a unit of your cavalry, it has come back. But now the Hobbits are going to be very much focused on, or they should be very much focused on safeguarding this firework launcher back to a position. They're not going to get it all the way back to their infantry, to be honest with you. Their infantry is too far away. They're going to need to just get it up onto this hill and start firing away into the Númenor infantry line. That's going to be the way they're going to have to do things here. Meanwhile, Lothlórien and Umbar colliding with one another, and Lothlórien's high cavalry contingent will actually be very useful here. Umbar do have their heavily armoured spearmen, but with only one unit of the Umbar cavalry here, Lothlórien will be able to make use of all their numbers, and they've already done a huge amount of damage to the Balaguer archers. The footmen are coming in now, so a unit of basic spears as well. There are the Corsair crossbows, which if I were Lothlórien, they would be my first target, because they're very easy to kill from a distance with their low armour, and they're very dangerous if you allow them to get into position as well. The Adunheim Lancers are getting shot up, presumably by all these special projectiles that Lothlórien have available to them. Indeed, we have the Lorinand Archers, we have the Riders of the Goldenwood with their Silverthorn arrows, and they're being blocked from getting in behind the Lothlórien line by the Lorien Lancers, which of course are going to be no match for the... oh no, those are Adunheim Lancers. So Umbar do have a second unit of cavalry, but it would be the Alcarondas Faithful that would be most useful against the Lorien cavalry, because certainly on a map as narrow as this, you can't really expect Lancers to get in behind the enemy lines. Ooh, what is that? That is a... that is some hefty lag. I'm wondering what that is, even. Is there something over on this side? Well, the Remena Caribrim are trying to worm their way into the fireworks once more. But once again, their only reward is going to be a Bjorning axe to the face, although once again I think they're going to try and get in and around, but I would be surprised if they weren't routed by doing this, because they're going to have to go through the meat grinder in the Bjornings, very much so. No, they've managed to steady themselves, and again, this comes down to just experience, I think. The fact that Sin's been playing the game so long, not to say Master Blaster is an inexperienced player by any means, but when you're facing off against cavalry like this, you have to keep following them. You can't just give an attack order and then leave them, because that will not work. Having said that, I don't think the Caribrim are going to be able to kill off this catapult unit, but this might, because now the cavalry and the Ents for the Hobbits are out of position, and that means the fireworks are going to get clattered by the returning unit of Remena Caribrim. And as I said, I think if this firework launcher is killed, that's the end for the Hobbits. They will not be able to dislodge Númenor from the high ground. They will not be able to force Númenor forward. Númenor will be able to go in as slowly as they want to, and the Hobbit infantry will be in real trouble then. The Caribrim are trying to get out of there once again. There's only 20 of them left. They could rout here. Yeah, and again, I mean, you can see Sin doing exactly the right thing, pulling his cavalry out, going after the fireworks, because he knows that trading these 2 units of Cerebrum for the fireworks, even though that's a huge money swing in favour of the Hobbits, is well worthwhile for him to do. Because if he allows the fireworks to get into position onto this hill, he's going to be able to shoot right along the Númenorian infantry, which is now moving in on the Hobbit position. But if he's able to kill them off, I honestly think the Hobbits are in massive trouble. Because the Ents and the Bjornings have already been in combat with the Númenorian cavalry, now trying to save that firework launcher. We are going to see the first clashes here, though, and as strong as the AP from the Hobbits is, overall a unit like the Remena Abarim should be more than enough to deal with the battling Brandybucks that are coming towards them. The Farmers of Buckland will do significantly better just because of their higher charge bonus, but even so, like, when it comes to outlasting an opponent, Númenor are going to be far more adept at that than the Hobbits are. The Proudfoot Protectors have got their crossbows firing, which is another unit which is going to do a lot of damage. They're the Royal Legion of Armanelos, but you can just see from the positioning and how the engagement is going that, you know, Númenor are in a very good position here early on in the fight. Have they managed to save the fireworks is the question. They have. That's a really significant moment, because for all of the battering that this firework launcher has taken, they have managed to save them. Meanwhile, over on this side, still very much an interesting fight this, because you can see that they're trying to both go up onto the high ground, the shield guard, the Lorinand archers. The problem I think that Umbar is going to run into here is the fact that the Balaguer archers have already taken grievous damage from the Lorinand mounted company. Adding to that, the fact that these Balaguer archers are still having to stand way out here in front without any sort of support. And Lothlórien are doing exactly the right thing. They're not shooting the Balaguer archers. They are instead going after the more important units like the Alcarondas Legion. You can see there that Balaguer footmen went forward all on their own into the Lothlórien lines. And now you can see the Silverthorn arrows coming forward, knocking the Alcarondas Legion all over the place. Umbar are definitely on the losing end of this engagement. The Lorien cavalry, which most people tend to think quite, well, not as highly of as some of the other Elven cavalry units, just because, you know, they are lancers and they can be cost effectively dealt with by quite a few units. But this is them at their very best. They're destroying the Umbar skirmish line, and at this point Umbar is just sending individual units to their doom at the hands of the Lothlórien army. So honestly, Umbar probably would have been way better off trying to go in more aggressively here, because Lothlórien did bring a lot of archers, which can be their undoing if you're aggressive against them. But Umbar have already sat back for far too long at this point. Their Corsair Blackguards are too far away from the action to really affect it. Up here on the high ground, the Adunheim Shield Guard are trying their best, but again, they're just being cost effectively put into a little box by the Lorien infantry. And you can see now Blades of the Wood are moving forward, the Adunheim Shield Guard are here. The Lothlórien cavalry has really had everything its own way, because the Alcarondas faithful have been kept too far away from the fight. If they had been sent forward, you can actually see some of Sin's routing units are all the way over here now. You can see the Karas Galadhon's Guardians getting up onto the high ground. Here come more Balaketh Axe Guard, but again, like, the AP is decent. Well, it can be useful against Lothlórien, because other than Imladris, they do have the highest armor values for all the elves, but still, I mean, the skill is going to be what undoes them here, and of course the lack of a shield means all of the Lothlórien skirmishers are going to be in a very good place themselves. Meanwhile, we actually missed the fireworks launching, because I was eager to actually keep track of everything across the battlefield, but I don't think that matters too much now, because I think the fireworks are finally going to be killed, possibly, by the Cerebrum. I mean, here come the Bjornings. We can see, though, from the corpses that are littered across the battlefield over here, that the firework launcher did get a few decent hits off. There's also some dead farmers over here. Yeah, not half bad. I mean, some of this was also down to the crossbows, almost certainly. But at this point, it's too late. The firework launcher's support was needed far sooner. Even if they do manage to save the fireworks, the micro that was spent over there was micro not spent over here. And Sin has managed to very effectively deal with the Hobbits, to be honest with you. And again, this does go to show that if the Hobbits are not able to execute their game plan, if their support is taken away from them, the lower sort of defensive values they have going for them is a problem. You can see here the Farmers of Buckland are actually defeating Remena Abarim, which again is kind of ridiculous when you think about it. But also the Royal Legion of Armanelos able to get in behind here, preventing the Proudfoot Protectors from shooting. That does mean that they pulled out their pikes, of course. The Royal Legion of Armanelos won't kill this unit off quickly because of the pikes, but it will stop them from firing, which, without those crossbows, it's only a matter of time for Númenor eat the Hobbit army alive, to be honest with you, and there's still a lot of supporting units which have yet to actually make it to the front line. So a very efficiently done fight, I think, here from Sin. Chaotic, to say the least. Technically speaking, the Hobbits will still have a presence on the field. I mean, they still have the fireworks, and they still have their two strongest individual units in the Bjornings and the Ents, without a great deal of damage done to them. But, I mean, the Hobbits aren't going to win this fight, you would think, unless the Bjornings sort of tuck themselves away in the corner and just sort of wait. We'll see. We'll see if the Shire is able to spring a wild comeback. Meanwhile, you can see here the Adunheim Lancers have been able to get in behind the enemy lines, going after the march wards of the wood. How are Umbar trying to salvage the situation here? The crossbow Corsairs getting charged by the Lothlórien mounted company. Again, as soon as they revealed themselves, Lothlórien knows how strong this unit can be. Finally, the Alcarondas faithful are getting into position now to help put this Lothlórien cavalry down. A little bit too late for my mind, because already they've done a lot of grievous damage to the Umbar forces. You can see here the Balakath Axguard charging right into the front of the Karaskalaton's Guardians, which of course is going to go about as well as you would expect. As a pike unit, they won't do damage at a hugely fast rate, although they are the strongest unit of pikes in the game, so they do have higher attack stats than the rest. They will still kill off the Balakath Axguard, but maybe not as quickly as they might like. Adunheim Shield Guard are over here, there's also the Elder Council. Blades of the Wood on the front line, but at this point actually being overwhelmed by the heavily armoured Umbar infantry. And this is where having a lot of skirmishers can start to work against you, because they don't really have too much else that they can send to the front line. The Lothlórien and Axemen were a little bit too far away. And like I said, like bringing too many archers as Lothlórien, there is the very, very real temptation to do that because of how strong Lothlórien's archers can all be, and then you'll have poison arrows, silver thorns, high missile damage. But you won't have enough infantry to hold your front line. As I've said before, in 0.97, infantry is much more important than it was in 0.96. You cannot just sit and shoot in 0.97. That is a fantastic way to lose yourself the battle. And in spite of taking a lot of early losses here, Umbar could be able to fight their way back into contention here. The Lothlórien mounted company already being sent packing very quickly by the Alcarondas faithful, and now they can continue their charge forward. Potentially into the Watchers of the Golden Wood. Of course, Umbar is still taking a lot of damage on the approach. The Corsair Blackguards immediately being targeted down by the Watchers of the Golden Wood. And with their Silverthorn arrows, that's just going to make things that much worse for Umbar on the approach. But there goes the Blades of the Wood, killed off by the Umbar infantry. Infantry is one thing that Umbar are very strong at, of course. Blades of the Wood defeating the Adunheim Shield Guard, who are actually pointing the wrong way. It's easy to lose micro and things like that in this sort of situation. The Riders of the Golden Wood are in the backfield now, though, and that's going to be bad because they are, of course, very strong. They are horse archers, so they don't have necessarily the best charge, but the mass of cavalry will do most of the work, especially against a lowly trebuchet crew. But the Riders of the Golden Wood need to be careful, because if they do allow the Corsair Blackguards to get decent volleys off on them, they won't last too long. And as if that wasn't enough, the crossbow Corsairs could also turn around and make quick work of them also. Javelins and crossbows together, even the strongest of elven cavalry will struggle against such things. I think actually it's about time we went back up to 1 speed. Yeah, and there go the crossbow bolts, already causing a few unit models to be bled, and there goes the javelins, which that's a pretty lethal volley as well. The Riders of the Golden Wood finding themselves isolated, and again, if you can't kill off the entire artillery crew, much like Sin found out earlier on, you know, the artillery is still going to be a factor, albeit for Sin things went pretty well. And here we get to see the fireworks launching, hitting their targets, and again, this is going to be a problem for Sin because he is going to need to reform his army pretty quickly. Identical in mechanical terms to the Watcher, bombarding the Númenor position, getting a lot of kills on a lot of these units, and while Sin was able to very effectively deal with the main body of the Hobbit army, Pharazim nobles charging in, albeit the Proudfoot protectors immediately turning around and doing a lot of damage to them with their pikes. He does need to be careful at this point because the Hobbits are still a factor in this battle. Sin has got a lot of his infantry over here. Again, if I were the Hobbits, I would probably just keep using my fireworks on this position over here, trying to go after the Seafarers, because that's where most of the hits can be taken. What have we got over here? That screen shake on the... my word, what on earth is going on here? It's like something out of a horror film. Well, I mean, I assume this unit model is dead. And if he's not dead, he probably wishes he was. And now the Hobbits are going to leave this area of the battlefield, and I assume they're just going to leave their fireworks to shoot into Númenor as much as they possibly can. What are they going to try and accomplish, I wonder? Because, I mean, going over here is all well and good. They can escape Númenor, but they'll run right into Lothlórien and Umbar. There goes Haldir. Sliced down by the Alcarondas faithful. And how is this battle going now? Lothlórien, a lot of their skirmishers, of course, the fact that they are elves does mean their skirmishers are pretty good in melee, so that is the silver lining to bringing a lot of skirmishers. Rise of the Goldenwood, only 2 men left now, so they must have really taken a beating in the backfields there. Trebuchet trying to do its thing, however. The fact that the Riders of the Goldenwood were able to come forward and do this previously, and now another unit of cavalry is going to do it. I mean, Umbar sort of leaving the back door wide open yet again, and the Trebuchet crew paying the price at the tip of a Lorien spear. And here come the Hobbits now at this point. The Sheriffs of the Farthings charging into the rear of the Lorien forces. There's the Umbar General, the only one left in his unit. And he may very well end up dying here because the Bjornings are coming in. A big charge from the Bjornings, doing a lot of damage to the elves and to Umbar. So the wild card here in the Hobbits coming forward, and the Ents still in fine strength as well. Here are the Watchers of the Goldenwood. If the Bjornings lose their hit points, they can honestly... again, that was maybe, you know, a very poor choice to try and send the Watchers of the Goldenwood into the Bjornings. You can see now that all sorts of missiles are finding their way into the Ents and to the Bjornings. But the Watchers of the Goldenwood largely destroyed after that charge to the Bjornings again. The Bjornings have got an absolutely brutal charge, so sending the Watchers of the Goldenwood, one of your very best units, into them, maybe not the finest idea. Of course, our blackguards are over here, and at this point the Hobbits... What the Hobbits could be doing, honestly, is giving this fight to Númenor, their previous nemesis. Still this... yeah, I'm not really sure what's going on here. Madness. But yeah, the firework launcher has finally been destroyed by Sin. Killed off at long last, and now the Númenor army is going to reform. And again, if the Hobbits are just going to blow right on through here, and presumably position their few remaining units at the back over here so that Sin has to go through Umbar and Lórien, or at least the remnants of these two armies, together, it might behoove Lothlórien and Umbar to consider the fact that Númenor are now by far the most healthy army on the field. If they continue to slaughter one another, it's not going to be great, but of course neither Umbar nor Lothlórien are going to be too keen on being the one to stand in front of Númenor first. You can see here the Balaguer archers sort of acting as a buffer for the Trebuchet crew. Lórien Mounted Company are going to pull over here, and I do feel as though Lothlórien had the better of that fight, to be honest, considering what's left of Umbar. But very much mutually assured destruction over here. A lot of death on both sides. And now, Sin, I think, is going to find himself facing down the ire of all 3 enemy factions, at least for the time being. Allies by circumstance, considering Sin had the best of times against the Hobbits. And Lothlórien are going to be the ones forming up the initial line, because someone has to. And Umbar probably will not. They may well be willing to offer a bit of support with their trebuchet, however, and with their javelins if they are allowed to occupy this hill. There's also the battling brandy bucks over here. I think actually we should move up to ×2 speed while Sin marches his way into position. At least I assume he will. Surely Sin isn't going to put his army in the corner. The shame. How very shameful. Oh dear, oh dear. I can understand why he would not want to charge into a united front against him, but the symbolism of putting your army in the corner and on a hill. I always knew Númenor were a coward's faction. We might even have to go up to ×6 speed, honestly, here, if we're going to wait for all of these armies to march their way into position. I mean, such behaviour will probably lead to Sin losing the fight overall. If the other 3 are wise, they will combine their might to kill him off first by attacking him from multiple angles on that hill. But we'll see. I mean, one thing that they do have to watch out for is if they advance and their armies get caught on one another, they will start to kill one another again. Yes, and it's going to be ×6 once more. as we wait. And I assume that most of these frames are going to be... I mean, they do have a trebuchet, but I mean, a trebuchet, unlike the Watcher, which loose formation and sort of spreading your army out won't really help against, a trebuchet will. Like, simply making your army wide, spreading them out into loose formation as well is going to simply absorb most of the damage it can do. And with how expensive a trebuchet is, that's one way to prevent it from being effective. And the trebuchet hasn't really gotten any significant hits so far, and it has used some of its ammunition, to be fair. So that's also worth bearing in mind. But Sin returning from whence he came, burrowing even further into the corner. I'm not saying that this is the incorrect thing to do by any means, but it's hard to root for someone who's putting themselves in a corner on a hill. This is really off-putting, this one unit over here. The horse in particular is really quite horrifying, but Umbar are the ones taking point now. The problem is, however, I think Umbar will actually go back down to 1 speed here. Umbar have moved ahead of Lothlórien, but their army is quite small, so Númenor could advance down the hill here and do a lot of damage to Umbar quite quickly. So we have Belagair Archer versus Belagair Archer. This is one of the few times you'll see identical units facing off against one another, because of course you can't mirror match in Medieval 2. So you'll never see Umbar versus Umbar or Númenor versus Númenor, but you will see them against one another. And the black of Númenor facing off against the dark red of Umbar. Corsair crossbows, Corsair blackguards. Yeah, again, this is all skirmishers. I mean, they're kind of fortunate, I suppose, that Sin doesn't really have a lot of cavalry left after he's expended most of it trying to kill off the fireworks. And now you can see arrows flying into the Belagair archers. Will Lothlórien commit some of their own arrows toward that cause as well? Perhaps. I mean, the crossbow Corsairs are moving forward, which immediately Sin is going to target them down. So I'm not really sure what they hope to accomplish by moving in here. I mean, I assume they're going to try and shoot. They can hide anywhere, so to be fair, not the worst idea. Parazim Nobles, there's only 6 of them at this point, and with crossbows and javelins on hand. Yeah, and again, he's moving them back. I'm not really sure what Umbar was hoping to accomplish there, to be honest, by moving them forward in the first place, if he was just going to retreat them anyway. So, the siege to try and remove Sin from his hill has begun. But as soon as the trebuchet is out of ammunition, they're going to have to advance up the hill, to be honest, and with a Dunaim shadow bows up there, and with Seafarers of Nin Damos, who I assume still have ammo, because I don't think... they needed their ammunition against the Hobbits. Forward come the Lorenan Mounted Company. There are men at about him moving forward, but they are going to be flattened in double quick time here by the Mounted Company, and there's no support nearby, so yeah, this is going to be complete destruction. Not a conclusive fight by any means, but certainly the newfound Red Alliance will take any advantage they can get. Sin positioning himself here. Belagair archers, backed up by Seafarers. More Seafarers, there's a lot of Seafarers that's still alive. There's only so much damage they can do though, but someone is going to have to bear the brunt of those javelins, you would think. There are the Bjornings. They're going to try and creep their way around to this side where their old army was completely annihilated. Still that guy there, glitching his way through existence. The trebuchet trying to push its way forward a little bit more. I'm not sure how much ammunition the trebuchet really has left. Or maybe this is a ploy to try and get Sin to use some of his ammunition on the crew. Because it may well be out of ammunition. It's already expended some shots on Lothlórien without too much success. Yeah, Lothlórien's army. And at this point, the Red Alliance will really live and die on the fact of whether or not they all commit themselves forward at the same time to attack Sin. Because if they attack one at a time, Sin will win this. Like, Umbar will get vanquished. And to be fair, they don't have a lot of infantry left to play with, the Red Alliance, either. Umbar certainly doesn't. Lothlórien has the bulk of that, and I don't think Lothlórien is going to be too eager to move forward first of all into this very highly defensible position. So I would back Sin to win this at this point, to be honest with you, because I don't think that they're going to have the coordination, the red team, nor are they going to have the willingness to attack all at once. Yeah, and here Here comes the rotting meat, falling very far short. Direct hits can kill off individual unit models, but they're going to need something a little bit more than that. Of course, our Blackguard's taking a few losses, so they're going to retreat, which again shows the mindset of all the red players, because while they do want to attack Sin, they want to have enough left over afterwards to win the battle themselves. And that means someone's going to have to make the first move. It could be the Hobbits. The Bjornings and the Ents could cause a lot of chaos quite quickly, but then that would also bank on the other two armies following them in quickly, and I've got a sneaking suspicion they're not going to do that, because it's going to come down to Lothlórien being bold. There's a lot of units here that Umbar, Númenor rather, have got. The Shadow Bows in particular are a key one, and you can see now that Númenor, all they need to do is move further back up the hill and shut the door on the Hobbits as they move forward. But I mean, credit to Master Blaster here, he is coming forward very quickly with his Bjornings, and he is going to be able to get a charge off into the Seafarers of Nindamos here. Sin showing the enemy his back and being made to pay for it. That's a lot of Seafarers that just died. And you can see they do have ammo, but they don't want to use it on the Bjornings. He could go after the Balaguer archers here as well, to be honest. He would be well placed, well, he'd be well advised not to go into the Naru Naaru Sentinels. Yeah, and here he goes. He is going to do that. He isn't going to show the Balaguer archers his back. He is going to charge into them and kill off yet more of them. This is the green light for the other two to move forward, and they are, which is good to see. I was fearing that Master Blaster would just charge forward here and expend himself on them. Balaguer archers doing their thing. Here come the Ents, taking hits from the Balaguer archers, also from the Seafarers, and the Seafarers will do a lot of damage to the Ents. The Adunheim Shadow Bows using their body-piercing projectiles. What are they going to go after here? Are they going to go after the Rangers? It would probably be the best target to prevent Lothlórien from being minced on the approach. But the Ents able to withstand all this pressure, and again, most of what was being shot at them was arrows, which is not going to be the best against the Ents. You're going to need... The best way to deal with the Ents, to be honest, is high damage infantry, and that's not something Númenor actually have a great deal left of, to be honest with you. They have the Royal Legion of Armenelos. But the Hobbits now, taking a lot of Sin's attention, and at this point, Lothlórien's infantry is colliding with the Númenorian infantry, and the Seafarers of Nindamos will be no match for the Lorenan Axemen. Some support from the Corsair Blackguards as well, and Sin being chased ever further up the hill. The Adunheim Shadow Bows have managed to retreat behind the Balaguer archers, and they are now managing to get some shots into the Lothlórien line. But the Balaguer archers won't last long against the Ents, that much is certain. And over here, Corsair Blackguards with the support of the Bjornings attacking the Númenorian flank. And I'm sorry, I can't root for Sin, having taken up a position on this hill. So I do hope that he is dislodged. Running ever further up onto the high ground. Lothlórien, however, having a bit of a tough fight on their hands here. They have kept some units in reserve, their pikes in particular. Elder Council retreating, Marchwards of the Wood, Blades of the Wood also routing off. So yeah, Lothlórien taking the brunt of this, but a lot of that can be brought down to the fact they have kept stuff in reserve sneakily to try and save it for later. Of course, their crossbows are there. Marchwards of the Wood being sent forward to try and shore up the line as the Lorenan Axemen, surrounded on all sides, are looking like breaking. The Ents are here, they have taken a few losses at this point. But they are also going to take down a great deal of Númenorian infantry with them, as the Ents will, without any form of high-tier infantry, armour-piercing or no. The Bjornings are still doing their thing in the back line as well, crashing through the Seafarers of Nindamos and the battling Brandybucks following in behind them. But now, I mean, the Bjornings are definitely a worthwhile target to go after with the Javelins. Starting to bleed a lot of unit models now. Lothlórien need to commit forward everything. They can't afford to leave stuff in reserve, otherwise all they're going to be doing is handing the game to Sin on a silver platter. A bit of a weak source rear charge there uphill by the Bjornings. Still a fair way to go in this fight though. Elder Council moving forward. Balaguer archers still firing in the backfield. The Lorenan Mounted Company coming in here. The Adunheim Shadow Bows still firing, and still Master Blaster doing exactly the right thing. trying to force path his units into them to kill them off, because if you can shut down the Rangers, you take away a lot of the potential damage that Sin can do. A nice charge into the Romena about him there from what's left of the Bjornings, but you can see now with how quickly they're starting to drop, their hit points are gone. And their defensive values, much like Wargs, once their hit points are gone, they become very easy to kill. Battling Brandybucks here in the backfield, finishing off what I think was some some Seafarers of Nindamos. Balaguer Archers trying to reform as they get chewed on from the side by the Corsair Blackguards. So Umbar and the Hobbits have had more success coming up and around than Lothlórien have had, coming dead front and centre, and now Lothlórien have committed forward a lot more. The Karas Galadhon's Guardians are here, and those pikes, it's going to be difficult. I mean, Númenor definitely being hemmed into the corner here, and all of a sudden it is looking like, now that Lothlórien have committed forward everything, you know, they're getting really no change off the enemy at this point, Númenor, and I think that will be what they need to win this fight, I think. So it's looking bad for Númenor at this point. The Ents are still right up in their business. There goes the Umbar general. On the slopes up here. Royal Legion of Armenelos retreating yet further up the hill. The Ents at this point, there's only 4 of them left, but has the damage they've done to Númenor up the Yavin terminal? I don't think so. There's still 61 shadow bows. The Ents still doing their thing though. There's still some Lorenan mounted company. Seafarers of Nindamos are being hunted down by the battling Brandybucks. This is pretty much the only thing the Hobbits have left, so the Hobbits, while they may not win this fight, they may very well have contributed heavily to Númenor's downfall. We shall see. I mean, this is still anyone's game except the Hobbits, I think, because the Ents are sort of trapped in there, unless they can force path their way out now, but I don't think they're going to be able to. And there's no way that a unit of battling Brandybucks is going to be able to see this over the line for the Hobbits. Then again, I'm not sure Umbar have a lot left either. I mean, they have some Corsair Blackguards, but I don't think that's going to be enough. Karas Galadhon's Guardians are getting shot. Balaguer Archers, Lorenan Archers. They're being shot in the back by the Balaguer Archers, are they? No, they're just being shot from on high by the Adunheim Shadowbows. I mean, certainly in terms of overall strength, Númenor is still in the lead. The Elder Council are now running for the hills. Just a single Ent left alive. There's also the Númenor General up here on the hill, Ar-Pharazôn himself, so the morale boost that he's going to be giving the nearby troops is also going to be very helpful to make sure that Númenor don't lose their stomach for the fight, because they're right on the borderline here. Anything that routs is immediately going to leave the field, no chance of it returning. There's some Balaguer Archers, 104 of them, battling Brandybucks. Are they going to charge downhill into the Corsair Blackguard? They are. So perhaps not liking the fact that Umbar is not willing to muck in and do as much work as he's done, MB, as if to a final spite to Umbar, going to kill off a couple of Corsair Blackguards with his battling Brandybucks before being vanquished from the field. But that is going to be the last thing that the Hobbits are really able to do here, unless they were able to save an Ent. I don't think they were. The announcer hasn't said that one of the enemy forces has been defeated yet though. And that attack has failed. Corsair crossbows killing off more battling Brandybucks. And I think perhaps it was the alliance that crumbled, to be honest with you, because I think they started to pick and chew at one another rather than keeping their common foe in mind. And I think at this point Sin is going to win this fight. He will certainly win this fight if he keeps the high ground, but I mean also, I feel as though at this point with the relative strength that Umbar and Lothlórien have, it's not enough to take that hill. They'd be well within their rights to retreat and expect Sin to come off the hill. I think that's what's going to have to happen here. Lorenan Mounted Company are retreating far away, and you can see, yeah, that is what's going to happen, and I think Sin on a bound at this point to come down off the hill, and he is doing so, which is good to see. Not obstinately sticking to the high ground, because he did send that assault. He turned that assault back very, very nicely. The Hobbits did a lot of good work early on, but I don't think that Umbar and the Elves were really willing to commit forward enough to really make that assault stick, and hence it fell apart. And ultimately, I think Númenor will end up winning this fight as a result. Umbar and Lorien were killing one another in that assault previous, and I'm not sure whether they're going to spite one another by killing one another. They might. Karaskarton's Guardians. Yeah, it looks like Umbar are going to march right towards Lothlórien. Maybe not. Maybe they have put their differences behind them once again. Again, there's a lot of dead air in this fight that I'm having to sort of time 6 my way through, but I don't want to make any hard cuts because I don't know when the fight is going to rejoin itself. What's going on here? Surely Lothlórien haven't come to an alliance with Númenor. Well, that is an interesting addition. I was thinking that the Hobbit army and its infantry was rather light on numbers, and this is why. Dunedain Rangers revealing themselves, and a whole nother Hobbit army pops into existence out of nowhere. A lot of it is made of Hobbitry and arms and long-bottom mob, which are by far and away some of the weakest Hobbit infantry. But the Dunedain Rangers alone are going to prove to be a bit of a problem. So all of a sudden, things turn yet again. It was looking like Sin was the one who was going to be ganged up upon, but now it would almost certainly be the Hobbits. And now we'll see whether the Hobbits and the Hobbitry and arms are going to be enough to withstand this assault. The Corsair Blackguards coming forward. It's a lot of Hobbitry and arms though. And into melee they go. The numbers favour the Hobbits. This is a tried and true tactic. I mean, and to be fair, Lothlórien are also doing it with their Galatharan Blade Masters and their Keren Amroth Rangers. So a tried and true technique in a free-for-all is to leave some of your hidden units in the back waiting. I would not be surprised if Umbar was suddenly to reveal a unit of Castamir's Rangers. Galatharan Blade Masters taking some direct hits from the Band of Brass Archers, albeit the Lothlórien Mounted Company proving to be a very important facet in this battle now. Tookish Hunters taking a huge amount of damage from the Keren Amroth Rangers, ripping through the Hobbits. Hobbitry and arms blocking the advance of the Galatharan Blade Masters. Who will win now? Because, I mean, still, technically Númenor with their Royal Legion of Armenelos and their heavy infantry still have a lot of strength bound up in their armies. I think Umbar are probably the ones at the most severe disadvantage with only Corsair Blackguards and Balagar Archers. Keren Amroth Rangers are definitely a big unit to have in this situation, but a bit of a gap appearing here as the Dunedain Rangers, there's pebbles being thrown into the Númenorians, there's full frontal volleys coming in as well, and I can see what Sin was going for here, but even if he does make it into melee with the Dunedain Rangers, I don't think he's really going to be able to win this fight. Another volley as well from the front. Long bottom mob shooting them from the side, so yeah, I think Sin with the Hobbitry and arms, they're just trying to hold down the centre. How much success they have at that is going to be highly variable, I think, depending on what they're fighting. Like over here, against just 13 Karas Gladhon's Guardians, they may very well win, but you can see here the Hobbits' low morale coming into effect as the Narun Aru Sentinels sending them scurrying for the hills. Hobbitry and arms over here, defeat seems certain as the Galatharan Blade Masters continue to hack and slash their way through. With the Tookish Hunters in there, they're going to try and go after the Keren Amroth Rangers, the mighty Lothlórien Rangers. Even more damage than the Dunedain. Yeah, you can see here, this is the problem with the Hobbits. They've lost their general, of course. Band of Brass Archers doing their thing in melee against the Lórien Mounted Company, or Lorinand Mounted Company. Long bottom mob rousing. This is the problem with having a sort of a hidden force like this. You know, mostly lower tier units which are highly likely to rout, and so it has proven to be, I think, really for the Hobbits. Yeah, it's a lot of routing. They just didn't have the stomach for the fight. They didn't have anything to really hold this line together. No inspiration units, all of it low tier, and a huge amount of Hobbits running for the hills in the face of the Númenorian and Lothlórien advance. They still have their Dunedain Rangers, but as bold a move as that was, I don't feel as though the Hobbits are going to be victorious this day, unless all of these units return, which is possible. Forward become some Corsair Blackguards. It's still anyone's game, really. I suddenly feel as though Lothlórien have got a bit of an advantage here, though. If they can get these Keren Amroth Rangers up onto the high ground, they'll be able to attack all comers. The Galathryn Blade Masters in melee will be able to go toe-to-toe with most everything left that's on the field. The Hobbits have returned, and again, the Hobbits have returned on the Númenorian side of things, so that's just going to do more damage to the Númenorians. I think Lothlórien are going to be the ones that end up winning this in the end. Absolute madness. Narun Aru Sentinels, what's left of the Adunheim Shadow Bows. It was a bold attempt at a sort of mass scale ambush by the Hobbits, but I think maybe they put too much stock in these units over here. Dunedain Rangers firing away into the units as they approach, trying to kill off some more of Lothlórien's men. As the Hobbits try and form up on this hill. Yeah. Longbottom Mob. Lothlórien Mounted Company sort of making sure that all of these Hobbits stay gone. The Band of Brass Archers are in the backfield though, shooting at Lothlórien in the back. Hobbitry in Arms have returned. Longbottom Mob have returned. Wouldn't take much to send them routing again though. I mean, with all of these returning units, the Hobbits could yet win this still. Umbar is still somehow clinging to life. Lothlórien Archers moving over here, forming up once again. I mean, it's this unit here which I think is going to be difficult, because the Keren Amroth Rangers are shooting into this blob that's over here, and they're going to be doing a lot of damage by doing that. Yeah, here they are, look. I'm going to try and kill off, I would assume, the Dunedain Rangers first and foremost, so they have nothing else to concern themselves with. Based on the amount of frames that are left, I would assume that this fight is maybe going to end in a Hobbit mass rout. Band of Brass Archers getting cycle charged by the Lothlórien Mounted Company, killing them off. I just don't think the Hobbits have got the strength left in melee to deal with this. As the rain continues to fall, Umbar's Belagar Archers chasing off yet more Hobbits. Corsair Crossbowmen are routing. Umbar is still alive. Númenor is still alive. There go the Hobbits. The player has admitted defeat at this point, and I think that was Umbar. I think sensing the fact their Belagar Archers would not be enough to win this fight by any means. The Hobbits, again returning from routing. Longbottom Mob, Dunedain Rangers, managing to escape from the clutches of Númenor up on this hill, but unfortunately for the Hobbits, they're going to continue to get cycle charged by this Lothlórien Mounted Company, which must have a huge amount of kills at this point. Just continuing to slice their way into the Hobbit ranks. Here come the Galathryn Blade Masters. They're charging head on into Dunedain Rangers and Longbottom Mob. But they are going to make it into melee. Fire arrows coming in from Númenor. Rapidly approaching the final moments of this fight. Galathryn Blade Masters finally sending those Hobbits routing for good this time, I would imagine. Hobbitry in Arms also routing off. Keren Amroth Rangers still very much alive. I think that's going to be too much for Númenor. I don't think Númenor have got enough manpower left to deal with them. There go the Hobbits. The Mounted Company are still alive as well to help worm their way in behind the Númenorian infantry that's left. Some returning Hobbits are over here as well, but the Númenorians will be all too pleased to try and deal with them, albeit under constant arrow fire. There go the Hobbits. Surely that's the end of the Hobbits. Well, technically the Dunedain Rangers are still alive. 18 of them remaining. I like the new model for the Dunedain Rangers. Yeah, there they go. So now it's a straight shootout between Lothlórien and Númenor, and I think Lothlórien, I think the Keren Amroth Rangers, if they still have ammo, they're going to be too much for Númenor. Yeah, there they go. Keren Amroth Rangers able to deal with them, pulling out their nice swords in melee. Their nice long swords, elven long swords, so similar to the ones of Lothlórien, they offer a little bit more in melee than a basic unit of human rangers. And as good as the Narun Aru Sentinels are, they're going to be overwhelmed and destroyed here. So Lothlórien, and they sequestered away a couple of quality units in that little nook, rather than the sort of mass ambush approach that the Hobbits went for. Lothlórien went for a little bit more quality in the Galatharan Blade Masters and the Keren Amroth Rangers, and that paid dividends in the end. Sin's probably wishing he stayed up on that hill all along now. But he came down and he died a more manly death than cowering in the corner. Yeah, Lothlórien are going to win this. And, you know, well played by Yo Ranger. In the end, he managed to leave enough strength in the late game to win the free-for-all, which often is what it comes down to. If you can leave enough left in reserve at the end, you are going to win. And in the end, the Elves, despite having probably the least attractive starting position, sort of caught between all three of them, they were able to win in the end. Victory for Lothlórien. And again, I think he did bring maybe a few too many skirmishers. I'm not saying the Rangers were a bad call, but if Umbar were willing to be a little bit more aggressive in the early game, they would have had much more difficulty, I think, the Elves. A lot of kills, of course. You know, again, the cavalry. Sin going off against the Hobbits had a huge army, but a lot of that was hidden until the late game. So it's hard to really quantify who really did the best, but a lot of good play here. A lot of good play from all the players, I think. A good old-fashioned free-for-all. The Pharaohs and Nobles getting a lot of kills. No, very well done. The Caribrim, not a lot, because they were trying to go after the firework launcher, and they were having to fight their way through Bjornings and Ents to do so. And 239 kills from the Rangers, so a very nice tally there. A lot of the infantry did okay, but again, the Hobbits have got all that AP going for them, so it's a bit of an awkward opponent for Númenor to have to fight in melee. Seafarers of Nindamos, not a lot of kills, however. I feel as though Sin, particularly when he was sort of retreating into the corner, I think he was trying to look for the ideal shot for his javelins, but in the end he ended up dithering too long, and the Ents and the Bjornings charged into them and did terminal damage. One unit did okay, of course, but yeah, I mean, Sin did okay. He did what he could, to be honest with you. He sort of found himself ganged up upon, went into the corner, fought them off, came down the hill, and then realised that the Hobbits and Lothlórien had more left in reserve all along. So very well played, very nice free-for-all, very back and forth, which is what you want from a free-for-all like this. And it's good to see Lake EVENDIM again as well, because I think it's a good map, especially for a free-for-all, actually. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this. Big thank you to Sin for sending me this battle replay. And I think we'll be doing another siege next. It'll either be Tol Falas or Bur Sagath, I think, depending on what I'm in the mood for. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll join me for whatever is next.